The Middle Ages and Renaissance were rife with sexual scandals. Leonardo da Vinci faced accusations of being passionate about orgies. Despite accomplishing great things, William the Conqueror was continuously referred to as bastard because his father had sinned with a tanner's daughter. Pope John XXIII was accused of having sexual relations with 300 nuns. Cesare Borgia, son of Pope Alexander VI, hosted events in the papal palace where nude prostitutes gathered fallen chestnuts off the floor. All in all, we've gathered 5 exceptional stories for you. Of course, there are many others. A tale in which immoral nuns, BDSM, and inebriated football fans are intertwined. The argument as to whether the early 16th century is part of the Middle Ages or not is still ongoing, but it is not vital for our history, given that it began in the 13th century. The female monastery Littlemore was established in Oxfordshire in 1245, but the religious life there did not go well from the outset. Initially, the location was considered unsafe due to cost-cutting by the contractors during construction. The nuns who arrived first prayed daily to avoid a potential collapse of the ceiling. Additionally, the rumors circulating among the pilgrims about Littlemore suggested that the abbesses were providing overnight stays for pilgrims and overcharging them for it. By the 15th century, the monastery was already known as a den of wickedness and theft. Few people remember that these two things often go together. The nuns lured young country boys into their abode and held wild parties. And when the wine stores were emptied and there was nothing left to drink, they started selling utensils. These misdeeds would have remained hidden if not for the new Mother Superior Catherine Wells' interest in S&M. The nuns were continuously beaten and punished in cruel ways. Over 8 years, many complaints were made, and in 1518, a commissioner was sent by the Bishop of Lincoln. Upon arrival, the envoy discovered that the situation was worse than expected. Based on the reports, Littlemore had turned into a brothel, and the nuns were practically starving since they had sold almost all their food supplies. Additionally, there wasn't any wine left. But most scandalously, the prioress had given birth to a baby girl by a priest from Kent called Richard Hughes. Most of the candlesticks and silver trays sold by the prioress were saved up for a dowry for her daughter. So at least she was no stranger to maternal love. Everything ended even more bizarre than it began. By bishop's decree, the monastery was disbanded. Before that, the nuns set fire to it, almost burning it to the ground. The building was abandoned, and a couple of hundred years later, the Priory pub was opened in the only surviving annex. In 2013, it was vandalized by a mob of drunken football fans. His sinful past, including robbery, sex with nuns and a witch, and sodomy, did not impede his spiritual pursuits. Pope Baldassare Cossa is an odious figure. He was fantastically sinful and monstrously lucky. He started as a humble student of robbery at the University of Bologna and eventually became the leader of a pirate crew that pillaged the Mediterranean coastline. But even Urban VI was not ashamed by the minor wrongdoings Baldassare committed in his younger years, nor by the fact that his lover was a woman who was officially condemned as a witch and sentenced to be burned. He employed the intelligent young man as his assistant and even promoted him to the rank of bishop. Naturally, while in service to the Pope, the former pirate did not hold sermons, but instead engaged in torture, killing, and the intimidation of His Holiness's foes. After Urban's death, Baldassare took the throne and adopted the name John XXIII, but he ruled from Pisa instead of Rome. He was removed from power after only 1 year because he faced 74 charges ranging from sodomy, having sexual relations with 300 nuns, denying the afterlife, selling holy relics, murdering Pope Urban, currency manipulation, having sexual relations with his granddaughter, burning down monasteries, and torturing bishops. There were other accusations, like the alleged immoral act with a whole family, consisting of the father, mother, son, and daughters. If an ordinary man committed half of that, he would have been put to death. But Baldassare was not an average man. He had the courage to confess his misdeed to the new pope, who then reinstated him as Bishop of Bologna. Donatello himself even designed a monument for his tomb. A love story turned sour. Pierre Abelard, a celebrated Middle Ages philosopher, was an ambitious churchman and gifted speaker, poet, theologian, and scholar. But it wasn't his groundbreaking philosophical works that brought him renown, it was a sex scandal that rocked all of Europe. Abelard worked as a teacher, among other things. Canon Fulbert, a spiritual benefactor in Paris, gave Pierre Abelard responsibility for his 17-year-old niece, Eloise, and, unsurprisingly, later regretted it. Instead of scholarly pursuits, Abelard and Eloise began studying anatomy. Sometime after, Eloise became pregnant. This was only the beginning of their troubles. Fulbert demanded that Pierre marry Eloise and accept the child as his own. Pierre agreed. At some stage, Eloise went back to her uncle's house even though she had wedded Abelard. Nevertheless, she declined to marry him, reasoning that it would ruin his exceptional spiritual profession. Naturally, Fulbert assumed that Pierre had influenced her with his scholastic sleights of hand. He acted as harshly as he could. His servants broke into Abelard's house in the middle of the night and removed the philosopher's testicles. However, he not only survived, but also won Fulbert's war for the minds of his fellow citizens. Abelard and Eloise both joined the monks. They continued to exchange sincere platonic love letters until death, which moved all of France to tears. Fulbert was enrolled in the villains, Pierre with the unjustly injured thinkers, while Eloise became a symbol of pure and chaste love. Their son, Astrolabe, was left in the care of Fulbert after they both passed away. In general, this tale appears quite unsavory, and the overly passionate uncle even evokes some compassion. However, who are we to render judgment on matters from the 12th century? How to lose a kingdom for having spontaneous sex with a relative. King Valdemar I Bergerson of Sweden lost everything in the most foolish way imaginable. He lost the Pope's respect, was publicly declared mentally incompetent, and finally lost his throne, all because he couldn't control his sexual desire for a family member. Valdemar was married to the daughter of the Danish king Eric IV, nicknamed Plowshare. The latter had also masterfully blown his throne due to huge taxes, but at least he managed to keep his daughters well settled. Sophia, the eldest, married Waldemar, and Jutta, the youngest, joined a convent. But Jutta escaped and sought refuge with Sophia, where she quickly seduced Waldemar. They didn't bother hiding their affair, especially when Jutta gave birth to a child. The Swedish monarch was incredibly eccentric and approached the Pope in Rome himself to seek approval for his divorce from older sister, who he found dull, so he could marry her's adventurous and sexually spontaneous younger sister. Even Henry VIII in the 16th century had to form his own church to manage his infidelity, but in the 13th century, the Pope not only declined Waldemar's request but also required him to pay a substantial indulgence. Upon his return, the king delighted his people with two major announcements. Firstly, the church had officially recognized him as a grave sinner, and secondly, ordinary taxpayers will pay for it. This led to immediate challenges to his reign, with other claimants to the throne emerging and eventually declaring him unfit to rule. However, the king did not give up easily and spent a long time attempting to stir up rebellions and attract foreign support to no avail. This only aggravated his situation, and instead of house arrest he was killed. Apparently, he was simply starved to death in Nyköping Castle. The castle, by the way, was later destroyed by the king's loyalist rebels, making it another victim of this tragedy. A leader who had intimate relations with subordinates to strengthen his position. But European monarchs and nuns were not the only ones to engage in immoral acts. Chinese rulers had surpassed them in depravity millennia earlier. However, the emperors lived extremely isolated, and their antics, even the most perverse, were deliberately ignored. Stories of the emperor's shenanigans were only leaked to the people when it could deprive the dynasty of the heavenly mandate. For example, Emperor Wenxuan liked to walk around naked in front of his servants, even wearing women's makeup, and could easily fall asleep drunk in the street. Emperor Gao Su hated Confucian scholars so much that he knocked off their hats and urinated in them in front of all the honest people. Ironically, he also made Confucianism the state ideology, when he realized how convenient it was for ruling the country. Emperor Di Xin ordered a pond filled with wine and islands of snacks to be built for himself. Many of his officials drowned in it, much to the monarch's delight. However, he himself was eventually overthrown and ended his reign by jumping into a flaming frying pan. Against this backdrop, Emperor Zhengde of the Ming dynasty looks a little more adequate. At least he tried to engage in the running of the country, rather than drinking like a cursed one. The young ruler learned Arabic, Mongolian, and Sanskrit, led successful military campaigns against the Mongols, secured the northern borders, and prevented a major rebellion. But he is remembered more for his eccentric behavior. Zhengde took lovers among the eunuchs, adopting 100 of them. He also liked to disguise himself as an ordinary citizen and visit cheap brothels, sometimes bringing unsuspecting prostitutes to his palace. Most egregious, according to contemporaries, was the fact that the emperor's favorite lover was an Islamic subject, Sayyid Hussein, governor of the city of Hami. However, it is believed that this was more political than a love affair. The city was a crucial bulwark in the country's defense against the Mongols. Apparently, it was the most reliable and familiar way for Zhengde to gather with his subordinates.